So, like I mentioned earlier, this presentation is titled The Smarter Balance, Tools for Teachers. It's being presented by the Nevada Department of Education. It's part of the admin series. And today is Wednesday, October 5th. And again, we are honored that you're here with us this afternoon.
So a couple of things.
Go ahead.
So a couple of things we're going to go over this afternoon. I'm appreciative to have my colleagues here to help me to help review what we have going on here. So it's tools for teachers. A couple things we have. So welcome. We've sort of done a little bit of that. We have something called bits and pieces, some key things in case you would like to receive credit for attending. And then we're going to dive right into it and then go through what is the formative assessment process as a brief overview, and then really diving into what is tools for teachers as part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, and hopefully get to go through some practice scenarios and then answer some questions, and of course have our contact information for you. So since I'm first up on the list, my name is Mary Holsclaw. I also work in the Office of Standards and Instructional Support. I'm actually the main contact for Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers, and do a lot of work with recruiting educators who would like to be part of the instructional resource writing process, and some of the questions that are pertaining to access for tools for teachers and how that can also be useful in the classrooms. And I'm very happy to be joined with today my two colleagues here who can happily introduce themselves. So next we have Mark Rincon.
Thanks, Mary. Like Mary mentioned, my name is Mark Rincon. I'm the K-12 ELA lead here at the department, and I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Again, my name is Mike Mosqueda, and I'm the 7 to 12 Pro EPP, or we call it Educational Programs Professional, here at Office of Standards and Instructional Support at NDE.
So some bits and pieces for this afternoon. Again, like we mentioned earlier at the start of this presentation, this is part of the admin series for the 2022-2023 school year. Participants who attend can receive professional learning hours or even also college credit through Southern Utah University. We ask that you complete the attendance roster link that was dropped in the chat. Also, we ask that you complete the exit survey, which is required for completion. We also are excited to share that this is not only the professional learning opportunity that is being offered through the admin series. We have a whole slew of different opportunities where administrators can come together and learn about some great professional learning opportunities. These admin series allow administrators like yourselves to be engaged and hear from others. And also it establishes a professional learning network with your colleagues. The introduction for this afternoon is that we're going to be going over the Smarter Balanced Assessment System, which is an ecosystem containing 3 major components, all designed to improve teaching and learning. So those 3 components that we're going to be going over this afternoon are: 1, the formative assessment process. We're going to just touch a little bit. We're not going to touch deep dive into the interim assessment. We're just going to briefly talk about it, and then also maybe share a little information about the summative assessment. But what's nice about the Smarter Balance Assessment System is that each component has a related application to support students and educators. And so really this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the tools for teachers. In addition to the tools for teachers, you can find additional supports in regards to reporting systems or sample items from the Smarter Balance website and also the Smarter Content Explorer. But again, like we mentioned earlier, just this afternoon, we're going to be covering tools for teachers. So what is the formative assessment process? What is it? Well, we know that it is a process, not a test, but the process involves the use of assessment-based evidence by teachers and students to adjust teaching and learning. So, let's dive a little deeper into the formative assessment and what it really is. So when we think about the formative assessment, it's really a planned, ongoing process used by all students and teachers during the learning and teaching to elicit and use evidence of student learning to improve student understanding of intended disciplinary learning outcomes and support students to become self-directed learners. So let's just think about that first. Let's take that apart a little bit. When we're thinking about the planned ongoing process, the formative assessment is a continuous, responsive process comprised of practices, methods, and tools that are selected to support all students in reaching challenging learning goals. Now, teachers and students collaborate to use formative assessments in responsive ways that positively impact the students and their learning. Now, let's take that even further and talk about all students and teachers during learning and teaching. So when we're thinking about this, formative assessments is a collaborative learning process happening with students, and not to students. And lastly, it really elicits and uses evidence of student learning. When we think about formative assessments, it's a process that captures the levels of knowledge and skills along the learning process. So teachers and students can take, that small, impactful decisions to support the students' overall learning goals. And, really in the end process, we really want to support students to become self-directed learners. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who's going to talk about understanding the formative assessment process.
So a great example of the formative assessment process, and it's really that real life feedback that you get. One of those examples was at the bottom in the slide previously, was when a cook tastes a soup, or when you cook a dish that maybe you're new at it, or you've done it so many times, but you're wanting to make sure it tastes the same, or you're wanting like a little extra kick, or making sure that you've done it correctly. You as the cook or as the baker are tasting it to get that real-time feedback of, okay, maybe it needs a dash of salt here. Maybe it needs a little bit of pepper. Maybe I have too much. Because you're the one cooking it in real time, kind of the same thing with the students and teachers, you're trying to get that real-time feedback. And then that's the difference between a formative and a summative. The summative is, if we were using the food reference still, is your guests having the dish. That is like, they're the ones that are going to have the final say, pretty much. That's the one that your final presentation. But what we have here, and hopefully the audio will work, we have a short video that was created by Smarter Balance, and it provides a really good overview of the formative summative assessment and how it's utilized in conjunction with Tools for Teachers, and how Tools for Teachers is part of that. So, Mark, if we can go ahead and try. Hopefully the audio will work for us. Those coming in, I greatly appreciate it. I will add the attendance survey again. And of course, with any afternoon, what's a couple of computer glitches? Because they happen. So while we're doing this, let's use some reactions. How many of you have interacted with formative assessment, be it as a teacher, administrator, or in your career? Got thumbs up. Thank you for playing. Appreciate it. And this could be something that you've done and just didn't realize it. Me as an educator, have some that have not really used it. I've got some thumbs up. As an educator, I was doing what I just did as check-ins, and they could be like those quick writes at the beginning while you took attendance, those little things, just to get a read of where my students are from the day before. Okay, Mark, are we ready?
We're ready.
Let's roll.
This video will explore the formative assessment process. The formative assessment process is used by students and teachers during instruction to adjust teaching and learning strategies to reach their goals. So what is the formative assessment process? Let's start with what it is and what it's not. Formative assessment is a process, not a thing. Even though it includes the word assessment, it's not a final test of what students can do. It is a process that occurs during learning, not after. In other words, formative assessments are assessments for learning, while learning is happening. On the other hand, summative assessments are assessments of learning, after learning has happened. Here's an analogy I like to use. Let's think about Olympic athletes. Before the Olympics, athletes practice. They use feedback from peers, coaches, and their own self-evaluation to improve. This process of checking, evaluating, and adjusting while you are practicing is the formative assessment process in action. Let's explore what this looks like in the classroom. The formative assessment process occurs throughout learning, and it often looks and feels like a classroom activity, discussion, or assignment. When used formatively, classroom activities inform next steps for students and teachers. On the other hand, if used summatively, classroom assignments sum up students' learning. It is important to remember that in order for a quiz or assessment to be formative and not summative, the focus should be on teachers and students using the results to adjust and inform next steps for learning. Let's take a closer look at the formative assessment process. This process involves an ongoing cycle of actions. First, students and teachers clarify the intended learning. This is the goal. Where are we headed and why? Then, they elicit and gather evidence of what students think, know, and can do. Students and teachers interpret the evidence by comparing it to the learning goal. And then they act on the information to move students forward. The process is fluid and informs both student and teacher actions. Let's look at each attribute of the process. The first attribute is to clarify intended learning. We have to start with what we want students to know, understand, and be able to do. What are the learning goals, and how will we know if students have met them? Think about the process you used the last time you put together a puzzle. Did you look at the picture first to know what the puzzle would look like when it was finished? Did you revisit the picture throughout the process as a guide when you got stuck? If we know what the big picture looks like, it can help us put the pieces together. Clarifying the intended learning enables students to understand for themselves what they need to learn and how they know that they've learned it. The second attribute in the formative assessment process is to elicit information about students' thinking. This requires students and teachers to use an assessment lens, meaning they gather information about how students are thinking about a problem, question, or task. Eliciting evidence of student thinking while learning is happening helps students and teachers make the right decisions about how to move forward. How can students and teachers know what they need to do next if they don't know where they are? Evidence can be gathered in many ways. For instance, observing, listening, and questioning students, allowing them to show their thinking through handwritten or computer-based work. Even asking students to perform, draw a picture, or use gestures to show what they are thinking. These are all great ways to find out what your students know so you can support them. The sky's the limit in terms of creatively eliciting information about what students think, know, and can do. The third attribute in the formative assessment process is to interpret information. When you elicit evidence, it's important to interpret that evidence based on the learning goals. This helps you and your students stay focused. It wouldn't work to evaluate a mogul skier's performance based on the criteria you would use for a figure skater. It's important to interpret and evaluate what students know and can do based on the specific learning goals and success criteria. Sometimes interpreting evidence can be hard to recognize because it can happen very quickly in the moment. On other occasions, interpreting evidence requires tools and takes more time. Let's look at an example of interpreting evidence in the moment. When a student answers a question, we immediately try to recognize where they may be struggling with respect to the learning goal. Other times, the interpretation process takes a little longer. For example, we might use a specific rubric to compare a student's performance related to the learning goal. Students can also use rubrics for peer and self-evaluation. The last attribute in the formative assessment process is to act. Now that students know where they're at and where they are going, we can help them get there. Taking action can involve adjusting instruction. For example, reteaching something in a different way, differentiating a learning task, using a new strategy, showing explicit examples or non-examples, altering the sequence of activities or tasks, or modifying the task for students in order to meet them where they are. We can help our students take action by providing them with opportunities to act on the feedback they have received. The formative assessment process is most effective when all four attributes are used together and students are fully involved in the process. This process can accelerate learning by identifying and acting on learning gaps in real time. The formative assessment instructional supports, along with the interim and summative assessments, are designed to work together to support high-quality teaching, improve learning for all students, and prepare students for life after high school. We hope this information about the formative assessment process was helpful. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so we have an actual example in the chat box of a formative assessment of a kind of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or has anyone tried something like a fist to 5 to get a gauge of understanding? Or after having watched the video, what are some things in your classroom that you may have tried that you now think are a form of formative assessment? Feel free to come off mute.
Mary and Mike, I see that we have some really great examples in the chat. We have some individuals sharing that they've used whiteboards recently, Jamboards, also having students write numbers of how they how much they understand a topic from 1 to 5. And also again, Jamboards, which were really helpful with virtual learning. So
Those are awesome examples. Love it. Okay.
and yes, we do. That would be pretty difficult to bring laptops to the PE class. So definitely. We appreciate your patience as we are just figuring out some technical details right now. So
Yes. So Mark, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide, we're going to go ahead and do our tech check. We're going to go ahead and jump in to our tools for teachers. If everyone can take a moment and try and type in the URL at the bottom for us. This is the time. Desmos is also another way. That is very true.
I think we forgot to mention that another good way to get do formative assessment is simply to ask the student.
Yeah. That is a great way of asking the student. Sometimes that's the simplest answer. Formative assessments don't have to be hard, as long as they're very informative in our way of instruction.
Okay.
Almost there.
So is everybody able to click the link on this chat, or copy and paste it on this copy and paste and run it on your URL? Okay. So David is able to load it but not signed in.
Okay, hold on. So those trying to, who do not have an account, this is one of those things of why we're doing a tech checkup. That would be why we are asking these questions, because if you find that you do not have an account, that is because you are going to have to get in contact with your school site testing coordinator, and we can follow up with those directions. One more step, I know, friends. Because this is now a single sign-on. For the work. And if you are, how many of you are, what grades are we teaching? I saw PE. What else? It's just a moment. Yep, could be also your testing administrator for your school district.
So we have one person from the elementary level. Another person, oh, same person from the elementary level.
Perfect. Is anyone able to get in? Because you know what, fun times? I do apologize for experiencing some technical difficulty.
So we have Dana able to log in.
Perfect.
David is not able to log in, and Devin, I'm assuming he's able to log in. He's the
Okay.
So
Unfortunately, I'm having issues logging in.
while Mary is getting this, trying to get her login corrected, I'm going to go ahead and show, if you go to smartertoolsforteachers.org, you can get access to some free materials that are basically based just on their homepage. I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see these. Does everyone see my screen? Okay. Okay. Thanks, David. So if you go to smartertoolsforteachers.org, it brings you to this site. And once you are logged, you don't need a login for this, but it gives you access to some really great quick guides to teaching resources and strategies that are really helpful for instructional tips, professional learning videos, and also classroom lessons. So first you got the connections playlist, you have instructional resources, you have formative strategies, you also have accessibility strategies, to support students using teaching strategies that increase equitable access to content. You also have access to professional learning, grow your teaching expertise, and get started using smarter balance tools and resources. And also interim items portal, which is you can access the interim assessment test questions for flexible classroom use and student activities. And so it looks like Mary's ready to go now. So I'm going to let her share her screen. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. So I know some of you, I just had a comment of, what if I'm at a charter school? That's okay. Please send me that information. Hopefully everyone is seeing a Tools for Teachers Nevada page. I'm gonna go with that's a yes, because no one's telling me no. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yay! I don't, oh. Okay. So thank you for bearing with me for some technical difficulties. They happen, right? That's life. So Mark was great at showing you what the generic Tools for Teachers page will look like. I have here, once you get logged in, it'll say Tools for Teachers Nevada. So if I actually log out, what it'll look like is this page right here. with general information. Hopefully everyone can still see my screen. Or what are we looking at? Everyone still see smarter, balanced tools for teachers, yes?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. So what you have in front of you here is the general tools for teachers page. What you can do if you do not have an account, you can access a few things. However, they'll give you previews. So let's say we want to give me a content area, keeping in mind it's ELA. Somebody give me a topic in ELA or math that they would like to look up.
You can try slope, finding slope.
Okay, I have slope, I have fractions. Okay. Fractions. Oh, fun part. Since it gave me an error in the sense that I need to log in to get the full site, but I want you to see what we can find just without as a general overview. So Tools for Teachers is really interesting in the sense that this provides you with a lot of instructional resources and access to not just instructional resources, but also professional learning resources. But right now we're just going to jump right on in to what some instructional resources that could be very useful in your classrooms, helping with a topic or maybe a grade. So as you see here, when I just type in fractions into that search bar, I come up with 89 resources. So maybe I don't want, and all these are math. I see a lot of things with fractions of grade 5, grade 6. You'll see some other things like interim connections playlists. And I'm actually going to jump to one of those. Let's pick grade 6. Okay. So the really cool thing that I wanted to point out with these playlists is that, so this is what you'll see if you are not logged in. But on the side, I want you to see there's all these different connections and you got performance progressions. So some of my friends that have been able to log in and those that have not, you're going to go down to the bottom left and we're going to log in. You'll see this pull down menu and you're going to click on Nevada. I know some of y'all are having some issues, but bear with me. Luckily, it remembered where I left off. So let's go back to that connections playlist here, the divide fractions by fractions. What I want you to notice is in this little description here, it's got what students can explain and apply mathematical concepts and carry out mathematical procedures with precision and fluency to apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication and division to divide fractions by fractions. So it has a lovely little summary. It also is going to hit on claim 1 in target B. And it also gives you some content standard information underneath with these connections playlists, which is very, very useful if you ever decide to filter by a claim, which I can also show you. So with these interim connections playlists, what we're looking at is there are these students' performance progressions. So in front of you, how to connecting to different instructional resources. So originally our search provided just resources themselves, but with the instructional playlist, you can actually tie them and see maybe you're looking at this claim or at this target. And also with how these are written, you can see how they're going to help a student who may be near standard, below standard, maybe they need additional help with it, and above standard. So let's pick from this list, going in, we're going to pick a resource here in a moment, but I also want you to see with this playlist, you have the list of resources, and then there are suggestions for intervention. So you can also do a search related to those following skills. There are also within these things to consider, food for thought for teachers, like tasks for this target will ask students to divide fractions by fractions, including using this as a strategy to solve one-step contextual problems, maybe which terms you need to look at. There's also a bit where you can go into and view interim items if you have that ability. I know there are some restrictions with some accounts, depending on what your role is. There's also another discussion with the testing director for ability. But this is also really neat in the sense that you can now, let's say we've worked on the concept, and now we can look at the interim items and maybe do like a formative assessment check. We've got also on the side academic vocabulary, some sample items and content explorer. And you can see here, we've also got these wonderful little videos that help explain things. I want to see. Also on the right-hand side is the information about the claim and target, and the standards are on there. Pretty much a lot of these connections playlists are really kind of like a one-stop shop, if you will, for resources, depending on what you filter. So let's go back up here and use, let's just pick, I don't know about you, but it's kind of like afternoon slump where you want a snack. So this edible cookie dough kind of looked really fun to me, and it made me think of like playing with Play-Doh. So let's click on it. So when you click on it, it'll come up. Apparently thought I logged off. The cool part about this is you can tell this one was done recently, November 2020. The cool thing about these instructional resources is that they are developed by teachers at instructional resource workshops. Those happen about 1 to 3 times a year. We have Nevada folks that come in, we have Nevada teachers, educators come in, and we also have educators from across the country that are part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium to contribute. I really love these resources in the sense of how they're basically built to be very user-friendly. You have an overview where you can see what's the gist of your resource here. You've got the learning goals, and they keep the success criteria from the student perspective. So I can compute quotients of one-step fractions by fraction problems, keeping it very short and to the point and highly accessible. Then they also go through what we call a step-by-step. Some of these can vary. A lot of times the first step is what are the materials you need? You'll notice, if you remember our little clover, you'll see some things that are in pink or have a clover to them. That means they are a formative assessment strategy. So that means you can go in here. This formative assessment strategy is already there. They're highlighting it. You can also click on it, and it'll tell you kind of what it is. What's an exit ticket? Sometimes a slip. It's that little task to give to all students prior to class ending. Things of that nature. Then you kind of go through clarify intended learning, discussing the success criteria and engaging students in metacognition. And they can also do like a number showing their understanding from their chest or the answers. And then this one goes into like an activity 1. The wording can change and vary depending on the author of the resource, but this one has 2 activities. I also want you to notice when you're able to get in here is this little person. We also have accessibility strategies written into each instructional resource. Between the formative assessment strategies and the accessibility strategies, you're going to see about 2 to 3 just because of usability and using them to the full fruition that they are. Sometimes you'll see a formative assessment strategy, because I see one right off the bat that's not been called out, and that is due to the author's discretion. And also really cool is after you do the step-by-step, you have these attachments here, also teacher created, that you can utilize, and these are user-friendly. You can download them. Sometimes you can augment them if they're a Word document and use them as you see fit. And then we have the discussion of the accessibility strategies used. And then here's the things to consider. And this could be an extension piece. This could also be maybe how you could rework your groupings. This particular author said, consider providing a math word wall with illustrations for students who struggle, and including English language learner students to have as a resource, to have that common vocabulary. And then of course, from the video, we go through, so the formative assessment process. And in this part, it's how this author is using it and clearly defining where the clarify intended learning is occurring, the eliciting evidence, how they're interpreting it and acting on evidence, and then how that feedback could look. There's also instructional moves, strategies used. This one has 4, sometimes 4 works without being too much. And then there's also a couple cool things on the side, considerations for remote and hybrid learning. And then where does this fall in a playlist? So this actually falls in 2 separate ones. That was a quick overview of what one instructional material looked like. How are we thinking so far about this? Let's look at another one. How about we pick an ELA one? Or better yet, how does this help you as an instructor or as an educator, right? We mentioned a couple of things. So we've got formative assessment strategies and instructional resources here. So I can click on that on the left. We have a whole list of things. This is what this normally would look like. How can we dive deeper into it? How can this help you in the classroom? And we also have a little bit more user-friendly in the sense of how do you look for a resource in general? A couple of things are what I've heard from educators that have used this is that it helps save time, that it's an easy supplemental material, if you will, and helps support when they find that students need more support. It can provide differentiated lessons. You got remote learning. We even have this wonderful remote learning framework here for you. And some sample resources. There's a wonderful tools for teacher overview. And we have what's the criteria for these to be written. As I mentioned, sometimes these are written slightly different because every author is their own person and their own voice. There is a criteria for how they go through the process and to make sure that they meet all the key points. I love it. David said differentiated lessons could definitely help those students that are at different levels of understanding of the material. Yes. Perfect. Any other thoughts? Okay. Let's look at a professional learning resource. How can we help ourselves, help our students? How's this going to help? Well, part of it is by looking at some of these. Some of y'all mentioned we're not really sure about the formative assessment process. We've done a little overview of that. Also in here, through Tools for Teachers, you can access videos that also review that, similar to the one that we've shown, of what does that even look like? How can this support your instruction? So let's look at formative assessment process. 52 resources right here. Okay. Another one could be remote learning in the formative assessment process. There's a framework and a template. You can also look at, let's see, understanding the individual student assessment accessibility profile. And some of these also go into the summative assessment side.
You know, Mary, I just wanted to add about some of these professional learning resources. You know, these are great for, you know, for staff meetings, if you're thinking about, you know, how to create that collaborative discussion with your staff, you know, sharing some of these instructional resources. I'm also thinking about, you could also take one of these practices and then do a fishbowl activity, and then have, staff look at, a group of, educators in your building, discuss some of these best practices. So just food for thought.
Perfect. I like it. Okay. Are there any questions, concerns? I know there are a few that are trying to get into Tools for Teachers. And I will work with you individually for that. And some of it may depend on, I know one person said they have a DRC account. So how this works with Tools for Teachers and DRC is that it is a single sign-on. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. It's a single sign-on, meaning if you have had access to DRC as an assessment or WIDA, that was an example, you would only have those permissions. And sometimes I've found teachers have permissions just for Tools for Teachers and not the assessment side. So that's why I'm only looking at one portion. So what we can do is I'll work with you individually if that is the case, and we can chat with your testing coordinator. But since I'm not seeing any concerns right now, let's do, Mark, can you pull back up the PowerPoint for me, please?
Sure, we'll come on back to the PowerPoint. So.
All right. So we went through Tools for Teachers. We can go through some of those sample items. A really cool thing is going to be Smarter Content Explorer. That one you can easily go through. Okay. So Smarter Content Explorer, you can select a grade, a subject for that. Mark, I'm actually going to share my screen. So great question. David has a question for us. Does it do K through 2? Good question. So at the moment, Smarter Balance only has 3 through 11 in terms of instructional resources and formative assessment strategies you can use at whatever grade, and same thing with accessibility strategies, and also Content Explorer is going to be from grades 3 to 11 as well. With that being said, Smarter Balance is currently in the process of trying to build K2 resources. That is part of their work. It is coming. So basically I can tell you it is coming. And that is being worked on. All right, so who wants to throw out a grade they want to look at while we look at this super quick? Not super quick.
Let's do 3rd grade.
3rd grade. Let's do Elicit. We did math last time. Let's do, you can also do a test. So that's actually deal with tests. This is kind of a leeway into some of the testing part of how you can see some of those items. Mark, since you said 3rd grade, where would you like to go?
Sure, let's go to choose a claim. Let's select reading.
Reading.
And then let's go with claim 1, target 2, central ideas.
Claim 1, target 2. So pretty simple, user-friendly. All right, so what happens is claim 1, target 2, I've got the central idea. It has also pulled up for me a sample item and a test. And on the right-hand side, you can also see what standards it will address. So let's look at our sample item. These sample items can be used in the classroom to help review content. So we're going to, sometimes there's a few clicks. Okay, so here's our sample item. So what they do is they provide your passage here and then your questions to the right. This one has a first part A and part B. And these are actually available to print, to use in the room, in your classroom. And the fun part about this also is that you can do what's about this item and you can get your background specs for it. What's the item type? So evidence-based selected response, and what's your DOK level, meaning 2, things of that nature. And then you also can use the answer key. And if I really like this one, I can also go to more like this to find more options. And then what I really enjoy with Smarter Balance is that they always keep in mind accessibility. So maybe I need to turn on some of these universal tools that are available. Having an English glossary on, masking and making sure color choice is black on white, accommodations, things of that nature to help my student. And sometimes the educator may have low visual and just for general use. And I can make this bigger to read through. So maybe I have a student that wants to highlight, they could be able to do that.
Also, while Mary is displaying her screen, these are, great samples to work with students, also to help them get ready for the assessment, and also build up those those test taking strategies when they are in that computer lab in a new, different environment. So.
Perfect. Great add-on right there. Okay. You also have practice and training tests. You can use sample testing software to help students for part of that test taking as well. And as mentioned, this could also be a downloadable PDF. So you've got item guidelines, some task models, things of that nature. I can click all these and turn them on and or not. So you got the standards, the clarification, you can do your range level achievement level descriptors, what's required evidence-wise, some of the guidelines, allowable item types for this. And there's some stimuli discussion. You got different task models available for you there. Okay. So that's pretty much the Content Explorer in a nutshell. You can use it in conjunction with the formative assessment strategies as well, if you want to tie them together, and the instructional resources to kind of give you a better idea of what a test item may look like for your claim and target. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, we'll come back to the PowerPoint.
Okay. So we kind of had it to where you, depending on how many people could have access, we wanted you to play around with it instead of just Mary showing you her screen. And so a couple of things is, A couple of steps could be that you just decide to go in and do a connections playlist like we did before. And you can do a grade and subject. We sort of did it in a different way in the sense that we typed in fractions and looked up that way and fell upon a connections playlist. But this is another way of looking at it. If we were to go back in and just do filter resources and click on a type, be it instructional, professional, accessibility strategy, depends on what the following options would be. But you can also narrow that down even more, just kind of like you would with Content Explorer. And then we said one person has full access.
Looks like that is correct. So what you're looking at right now is those interim connections playlists, like Mary had displayed on her a few seconds ago. You can select from one of these, many of these different connections playlists that go across many different content areas. You also saw some great instructional resources. Mary had shown us that, you had access to student performance progressions. So you were able to see the different resources, how they broke it down into 3 different categories: below, near, and above, when we were talking about student performance progressions. So these are, again, some great instructional resources once you work with Mary on getting access for tools for teachers. You'll be able to have access to all of these great informational topics that we're sharing right now. And so another, the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, has a plethora of resources for educators and administrators to really, dive deep into the assessment process. And, this is another website that you can utilize, and it's the Sample Items website. And we'll drop that link into the chat. But this is where you can also access some additional, if you're thinking about doing different grade levels, and then also selecting from English language arts or selecting from mathematics. You can also select different claims, from concepts and procedures to problem solving, communicating, reasoning, and also modeling and data analysis. We also went over the Smarter Content Explorer. That's when Mary, thank you so much, Mary, for showing us these resources within the Tools for Teachers website. So the Smarter Content Explorer is a different link. And so I know you're probably thinking, whoa, these are so many links that you're sharing with us this afternoon. Yes, there are a lot of links that we're going to be sharing, but they're really great resources that I think that all of you as administrators or educators will find really useful when sharing these with your teachers. Again, when you're thinking about bringing your staff together to do a professional learning topic, or if you're thinking about, how I want to explore this within my PLCs, these are some great strategies and resources that you can share.
Okay, so in the chat, I put in a bunch of links for everyone. They will also be part of the footer of the page. They're also going to be in the PowerPoint and things of that nature. But definitely go ahead. If as mentioned, if you're having trouble getting access, definitely connect with myself and we'll see what we can do for that. But some of the things I've gone through it, but let's go through a couple maybe of a scenario. A lot of times we've heard the phrase, I do, we do, you do, that gradual release model is used a lot in Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers. And then we also have the framework of Plan, Do, Study, Act of what are we getting ready to do? Sometimes as educators, and as we're getting ready for the next day, we're planning, then we do it, and then we're going to study. Maybe we need to change and shift gears and then act on that information. Quick question. The only subjects at the moment they provide are ELA and math. There is a conversation to look for science in the future. So Plan, Do, Study, Act. This is a fun one. Which one, where do you fall on this line of thought? Plan, Do, Study, Act. Let's do a quick one. Let's do a 1 to 5. 1 meaning what, and 5 meaning total, Deming, Lean, and 6 Sigma. Got a 2, 3. Nice. Okay. All right, Dana, 3. Yes. Okay. So we've got some that we're like right in the middle. Perfect. So more than none. We're not total gurus yet, but hey, we're getting there. So just a brief overview of the Plan, Do, Study, Act. David, I'm right there with you some days. So we're planning, we're going to collect that information resource to support the instruction, the formative assessment process, etc. We're planning, literally planning, gathering information of how we're going to get it done. Doing, let's carry that out. You know, you have this plan, let's do it. In this case, we're eliciting student evidence of learning. We had that plan. Now we're going to gather evidence of how they're learning, studying that evidence, and also doing observations. Some of you, I think somebody, the mention of being in PE, you're constantly walking the gym. I was going to say your classroom, but the gym, and you're watching what is student form. How are they acting as sportsmen, sportsmanship and things of that nature, or in your math or ELA class. In my social studies class, we would have debates and things, and there was group work. So I'm watching my students and how they interact with each other and eliciting information from their conversations. It may not be a written information or evidence, but just those conversations. And also looking at maybe the written component of the reports and their self-evaluations, going from that study piece to acting. So what's next? Maybe I need to go back and readjust how we approach or revisit or reteach the concept of the different time periods. What is before Common Era versus Common Era, and how we calculate time and do years. Sometimes that can be a little tricky. And then maybe we move on to the next target. Maybe there's an interim assessment. Maybe we need to keep chatting about it some more, and definitely taking note of what worked this time, and maybe thinking about how, if I teach this lesson again, what can I do differently for those lines of thoughts. Maybe how I teach someone how to roller skate works for me, but it's not translating to that person's skill level. Maybe I need to readjust, things of that nature. Okay. So this is sort of where, pardon for the fuzziness, where the Smarter Balanced Tools for Teachers kind of lands. So the planning, you've got the connections playlist, the instructional materials, some formative assessment strategies in the plan part. Those formative assessment strategies and instructional materials can work in that do section, and some with the interim and interim items. The studying, the formative assessment strategies and those connections playlists, you saw in that one example is that they kind of run all throughout with that whole formative assessment process of clarifying, planning, doing, studying, acting, and where you can go in that order. Because maybe you've given this lesson, but you needed to, maybe it's not working. Maybe when you give your exit slip or your quick write or your fist to 5, you're like, oh, there's a lot of 1s and 2s, not a lot of 3s through 5s. Maybe we need to clarify what we need to revisit and things of that nature. So that could be your acting portion. Or maybe I need to build more upon that one skill set. Like Mark's example of the central idea. Maybe we're struggling. Maybe I need to look at a test item to see. That could also be a quick write as an example, or just to check in really quickly. Lots of ways to use Smarter Balance tools for teachers. All right, so let's put this together. We're a small group. You're probably tired of myself talking, which is totally fine. It's been one of those long days. It's a Wednesday. It's okay. So here we have, let's just try to put it all together. So we have scenario 1. We have a 4th grade teacher who is prioritizing her students' writing skills when school begins this fall. She's teaching in a completely virtual environment for the foreseeable future. We know this has happened. So kind of keeping this in mind. So what should she do? So we're going to plan. So in her planning, she has this preparation. So as we go through this, what do you think? Would you do anything different? So she's prepping for the school year. She looks at grade 4 writing targets using the Smarter Content Explorer. And she's going to use some task models from the Content Explorer to develop exit tickets. Like I said, lots of these things can be used in multiple ways. Depends on how you use it. I'm also a fan of the exit tickets too. Okay, so we planned, and our next step is going to be, we have our plan. Now our next step is what? Let's do it, okay? So in her unit, we didn't really discuss the focused IEPs, but those are in interim assessment blocks. Keeping in mind that there's a lot of times an SBAC assessment involved, but towards the end of her unit, she chooses to administer this particular block, looking at write and revise narratives to help inform instructional steps. The assessment has 2 items that require hand scoring. Okay. So for her, she uses the training guide and reviews the hand scoring training materials. This could be completely different for what you're using, and has provided her state, using the materials her state has provided before scoring her students' responses. Okay, now we're going to study. So through the process, she's recognizing that many students appear to be struggling with one of the items focused on constructing endings. So she's going to review the results in that reporting system that we alluded to and specify the distracting analysis, specifically the distracting analysis to confirm. She finds that her students are scoring poorly on the organized items. Specifically, many students are struggling with beginnings and endings. That is very common for this grade because a lot of times the child will tell you a story and it just keeps going, right? Okay, so Mark's ahead of me. So maybe to help with this instruction, she could go to a connections playlist focused on this particular IAB and tools for teachers. And by reviewing that playlist, maybe finding additional instruction. And she can make plans to implement the playlist. And she's got a list of resources that she likes. Okay. Would there be, what are your thoughts on this, how this works? Do you think any of this you would adjust, or how would you react to this scenario? So David says, if this is all online, you could provide the links to all the information that they are reviewing. That is possible, provided your system allows that. So what are some of the things that you're noticing? We've called out a couple of different things. It's not just tools for teachers, but you've got hopefully the connections between the Content Explorer, and you've also got the sample assessment items, how they're not being traditionally used in the sense that this is just a testing item. No, we're going to use this as an instructional piece. Because as we know, sometimes when you get ready for a test, you can kind of see how that can also be influential. David's ideas for the exit tickets, you can have students search for the information, so it's forcing them to relearn or refresh the learned information that was taught in the lesson. That's also really good, because maybe, David, we can figure out where there was a misstep or a misunderstanding. Is that where you're going with it? And you're welcome to come off mute. Perfect. Okay.
Mary, I just wanted to share,
Sure.
these resources, like you mentioned, are not only just used for assessment, but, we can, when we are really thinking about our instructional practices, we can really take some of these websites and, share them with our educators. And, if you're having an educator that may be needing some more ideas or resources, you can definitely share. Maybe it's just sharing the connections playlist, or maybe it's looking at some small sections within Tools for Teachers. So I know there's a lot of information that we've covered so far, and it can definitely be overwhelming, but I think as we are looking at this as an instructional resource, I think one of my recommendations would be, start small and then go from there. So.
Okay. So that's the fun part, when somebody shows you something nice and fun that you want to use and then you don't have access. So fully going to help you with that, to connect, to get access with that. So we do have another scenario that we can go through and discuss, and it's from the math perspective. If we would like to do that. We're such a small group, you're welcome to come off mute and see if we want to look at it from that perspective and see what your thoughts are.
How are we
Let's go
feeling?
for it. Let's look.
Oh, sounds like we have someone that wants to go for it. So
Love it. Let's go for it. Okay. Open to learn. I love this open to learn. You'll make me happy. Okay. It's great at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Yay. All right. So scenario 2. We have a 6th grade teacher administering their revision IEB remotely several weeks ago and discovered that some kids just scored below grade level. Now what? Let's see what he does. So looking through, we have the Smarter Content Explorer. He's going to dig into it, focus on some revision, and he's going to pull out some formative assessment strategies and tools for teachers. He's deciding to use the STARS and STARE strategy throughout his narrative writing unit. And the plus side is that the STARS is like your wins, and your STARES are like how you can step up and keep moving forward. So he's planning, he's got his plan down through his next narrative writing unit. Oh, this is actually an ELA one. Oops. So in order to understand student progress, he's going to use the 9 revision items from the Write and Revise narrative focused IEBs to gather assessment information from students. He displays the items one at a time during a synchronous virtual learning and collects student responses. That kind of alludes to what was going on in the chat of, you can always share those links online, or maybe if it's a synchronous learning environment, noting that we've now more face-to-face, but keeping in mind this also can be used virtually. Okay, so showing those, collecting student responses, let's see how it goes. reviews the student responses to these items, compares them to their performance. He does see an improvement, however, he's identifying that many students struggle with making revisions that show rather than just tell key information in the narrative. Okay, so we're finding the part where I call it a sticky wicket, in the sense of they're having a hiccup understanding the difference, and they're trying to make those differences. So maybe knowing that, we can now make our next steps and act upon that information. So reviewing those connections playlists, this is where I like it when we can find what we're really focusing on, be it in a claim, target, or a topic, as we did with the fractions. He finds the write and revise narratives focused IEB and tools for teachers, and identifies the topic of descriptive language. Seems to be the area of need for these students, and he's going to use this particular playlist, words, wonderful words, in his class. So by using this resource in his class, hopefully, and as you saw before, they're written with consideration to students that may be struggling, are at or near grade level, and then those that are above, and how to help support those that are struggling, and maybe those that are just ready to keep moving on, and to empower them, and those that are at level. Okay. Okay, so this is the part where, apologies for not being a math example. But what are some things maybe that you have learned, unlearned, had no idea about, or relearned? Previously, it could have been like, maybe this was, we need the time for providing think time after hours of learning, right? Or maybe it's, I had no idea about tools for teachers, things of that nature. And it could be something as simple as that. I just realized tools for teachers existed, and that it had all these components. So I love it. At least we've learned, hey, there is this option here that is tied to the Smarter Balance, the SBAC assessment, if that's something you have to give. And you've got a couple of avenues to access and a couple of different resources. I'm seeing, had no idea this even existed. Trust me, a couple of years ago, I didn't either, until I was like, hey, what's this? And then it was called Smarter Balance Digital Library, and now it's evolved to Tools for Teachers. Love the evolution of the whole process, and how it's really very engaging for both students and educators, and user friendly. Relearn the importance of exit tickets. Used to do them online, but stopped once we got face-to-face. Fair enough. Hey, those exit tickets can be super fun. So I'm very happy that some of y'all are like, this is a wonderful resource. It can be used in multiple ways. As Mark mentioned, it could be used something in a PLC. Maybe you find there's this great formative assessment strategy you enjoy, or you just want to, wouldn't say for that part, or maybe these are good for when you just have that unforeseen sick day, but you want your students to still gain some knowledge. Tools for Teachers can help for that. You can also use some things from the Content Explorer to help beef up maybe one of those lessons, like Mike had mentioned. Those instructional materials are written to be as user friendly, meaning you could hand this to a first year teacher, possibly a substitute. That is up to your discretion. So anyone could pick it up and kind of run with it. That was the whole point when those items were drafted and those resources were drafted. So great. Okay. Okay, now we've come to our question and answer session section. So we're kind of What are some burning questions that you may have besides getting access? I will help you with that. Any burning questions at this moment? Mike's putting some great information. If you are very used to using one formative assessment strategy, Tools for Teachers has a list of quite a few. Maybe diversify your toolbox. Exit tickets are my jam, and so are quick writes, but maybe that fist to five's good. Yeah, we'll work on getting those slides out for you. Yes. All right, while you're thinking of those burning questions, it is that time to complete the survey link. Yes, we love feedback. I love feedback. That's also part of the formative assessment process, is giving feedback, actionable feedback, not the fact that Mary was super fun and funny, or that Mark is really great at manipulating the PowerPoint. He is. He's a rock star. Mike's really good with the chat box. But actionable feedback for us to become better presenters and to maybe we missed something. Things of that nature. Okay. All right, next slide, please. This class was for future and present. I would love for it to have been, yes, both.
Our next slide covers, if you want to use the QR code to complete the survey, but we also dropped the survey link in the chat. So please take a moment to complete the survey. That survey completion is required to get your professional learning hours issued.
And also, Mark, this may be a time for, besides just general feedback, but maybe you want another type of professional learning. I think this also falls under this bit.ly has that option. As I put it in the chat.
Thank you, Mary.
Because, as we talk to our students, we don't know what you need to know unless you tell us, or what you would like to know. Okay, moving on. All right. Ooh, guys. So we have coming up on November 19th. I apologize for that being so fuzzy. Our Nevada Teaching and Learning Conference. It's on November 19th from 8:30 to 4 p.m. You could earn 7.5 professional learning hours, and there's the possibility of earning a 1 college credit available. We can put that link in the chat as well. This will also be provided as a follow-up. And the cool part is that our lovely friends at Smarter Balance will also be providing a presentation regarding more about Tools for Teachers. And this is open for everyone to attend. We're going to have stuff about all 9 of the content areas, some digital learning and Canvas, some educational technology, some instructional tools. We're going to have Dr. Dan Meyer from Desmos, Dr. Josh Childs from UT Austin, and I hear there's the possibility of some really cool swag. So come chat with Mark, who's going to be doing some ELA fun stuff, Mike, who's going to be doing some math stuff, our other colleagues will be there. I might be running around doing some fine art stuff, but definitely hanging out with Smarter Balance for Tools for Teachers. It's going to be a great day. Lots of learning available for everyone. We already put the link for the workshop survey. We can do it again. We want to make sure you get your credit hours and things like that. So make sure you've typed in your attendance. If we need to, we have the same rough group. If you've not done that yet, please make sure you do your attendance survey, saying you were here, and doing the follow-up survey. because we like to have that information. Okay. Hey, look at that. Here's some contact information for y'all. If you want to get in touch with Mark, Mike, and myself, we got 3 M's running around here. There is our email. Those are our email addresses. Please reach out. We do want to hear from everyone. I can actually put these in the chat for you, so you can copy and paste if you would like. Definitely those having issues with getting access, please send me an email for that so I can provide some assistance, because this is a great resource and it is free for you to use. So why not? And maybe you'll know of some educators that would be highly interested in taking part in some writing workshops, because those will be coming up soon. I tend to send information out and it goes through curriculum directors and things of that nature and whatnot. Any last minute burning questions?